Good morning, everybody in Canada. Those of you on the East Coast, it's 9 o'clock in Toronto, and good evening to everybody in India, and a little earlier good morning to our guest today, the Saskatchewan Premier, the Honorable Scott Moe. Sir, we've have you a little earlier today, and it's our honor and privilege to have you today. And we will be joined with His Excellency Ajay Bisaria, the High Commissioner of India as well. Now, before we move on, some of you might be wondering, and those of you who probably don't know the history of why the Honorable Scott Moe, the Premier of Saskatchewan, is on an event which is titled "Agriculture Reforms in India: A Canadian Perspective." And now I'd like to all of you to think about that. It is not just another Canadian politician that we've brought on stage. There is a reason why we've got the Honorable Scott Moe, the Premier of Saskatchewan, here. And I think in the next slide, we will know that. So those of you, if that's enough intrigue and you've put enough thought into it, we'll move to the next slide. And you will know, okay, sorry, not next time, maybe the next one after that. This is me here. I'm Vijay Thomas. I'm the president of the Indo-Canada Chamber of Commerce. As my day job, I run a software company. But it is something that we've started over this Thursday talks, leaders talks is something we started last year as COVID hit, and we've had great success with this. And today, I think, is a fantastic event. We've got two great leaders from India and from Canada. So if those of you who are thinking, why do we have the Honorable Scott Moe here? This is the reason. In 2012, Canada introduced similar laws when it abolished the monopoly of the wheat board. Then Canadian farmers experienced similar uncertainties. However, come back to now, the farmers of Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba have immensely benefited, resulting in billions of dollars of agricultural exports. Saskatchewan alone exported $16 billion worth of agricultural produce in 2019. And one of the major partners of Saskatchewan is India. And Premier Moe and the province of Saskatchewan are actually looking at India even more intently. They have an office in India that they're starting up or going to start up, and I'll let the Premier give you the details. So with that, we'll move to I'll give a short plug for the Indo-Canada Chamber of Commerce Connects 2021. And this will all connect together because this is an event where we are taking Canadian companies to India. It'll be on the June 11th to 25th. Premier Moe, we have spoken to Saskatchewan as well to join up as a member here and as a partner. And we've got the province of Ontario, we've got the federal government already signed up. So this is something where we're taking Canadian companies and the focus being on small to medium-sized Canadian companies to India, looking at the Indian market. And we know that the big guys have already gone, but the moment we take small and medium companies, the floodgates will open. Moving on, here are the states we're going to, and here are the key sectors: technology startups, auto e-mobility, food and agriculture, slam dunk Saskatchewan territory, healthcare, pharma, education, travel, and tourism. And these are the states we're going to. So with that out of the way, moving on, little disclaimer: all the information provided by the ICCC is for general information purposes, does not constitute legal or professional advice. The middle section, I'll let you all read on your own. At the bottom, the views expressed by speakers are their own professional opinion and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of the ICCC. With that out of the way, nobody can sue us, and we move to the next speaker. For the first speaker, the Honorable Scott Moe, Premier of Saskatchewan. A little bit about the Premier. He was first elected to Saskatchewan legislature in 2011 provincial election in the constituency of Ross-Stern-Shelbrook. He was re-elected in 2016. He was elected leader of the Saskatchewan Party on January 27, 2018, and sworn in as the Premier of Saskatchewan on February 2nd, 2018. He previously served as Minister of Environment, Minister of Advanced Education, Minister responsible for Saskatchewan Water Corp, and Minister responsible for Saskatchewan Water Security Agency. So his main priorities include increasing Saskatchewan's exports, create opportunity for people, and further grow Saskatchewan's economy. And Premier Mo, I run a technology company, and we have a lot of customers in Saskatchewan. So some of this that you're mentioning, I've seen firsthand. You now even have startups in places like Regina and Saskatoon. So I think you've done a fantastic job, and I've seen that firsthand. So with that, I'd like to hand over to Premier Mo. Premier, we'd like to hear from you. What, as I kind of set the tone of the event, why the Premier of Saskatchewan has a say or has something relevant to something that's happening to India. We'd like to hear your views on that, and anything else that you might want to say in your opening remarks. So the floor is over to you, Premier Mo.
Well, thank you very much, Vijay, and thank you to the Indo-Canadian Chamber of Commerce for hosting myself this morning, as well as His Excellency, and hello to my friend, His Excellency here this morning. Saskatchewan, when you look at agriculture in Canada and why we might have a few words to say on Saskatchewan, is this province with, just about 1.2 million people, which isn't a large province by population. We actually house over 50% of Canada's arable agricultural land. Our ag exports last year peaked at $16 billion. That is our largest export out of the province, and it's increasing virtually exponentially over the last number of years. And one of our major markets and one of our major interests in the years ahead, and even today, is India. Over $1 billion of those agri-food exports do go to India, many of them in the raw form, and then are processed into higher processed in India, putting folks to work there, and then being provided obviously to the folks in India. Really grateful for the opportunity to discuss this issue that is of critical importance. I would say not only to Saskatchewan, Canada, India, but also to the world, and that's pushing forward the boundaries of our agricultural production. I do wish I was doing it personally. I wish we didn't have to do this over Zoom, but the next time we most certainly will do it personally. And there are better days ahead for all of us. Trust me on that. And they aren't too far into the future. Just a couple of words of thanks to the High Commissioner. We've been very, very fortunate and well served by the High Commissioners from India that have served in Canada over the last number of years. This particular High Commissioner, Ajay Bisaria, is no exception with his level of energy and his level of commitment to not only the Indian people, but to the international relationships. And so we really, really appreciate the strong support and the vibrant friendship that we have today and have had for a number of years with India. I had the opportunity to visit India in 2018, and it was a great trip. My colleague's Minister of Trade and Export has also visited in the last 2 years. He was there in 2019, and our Minister of Agriculture did attend in 2020. And so we've had two ministers and the Premier on the ground in India in the lead up to this pandemic. And I would give you my word that one of us is going to be back on the ground as soon as we're through this pandemic. That is the importance of the Indian relationship. I won't say the Indian market, the Indian relationship that we have. And I'll get into some of that in a few minutes. Last year, our exports, as I said, were up just over $1 billion to India. We probably rank among Canada's top, we are Canada's top provincial exporter to India. India also remains our top country for immigration into Saskatchewan. We've benefited tremendously from newcomers around the world over the course of the last number of years. And actually just in 2020, 2,000 people moved from India to Saskatchewan. That's the largest demographic of people that have moved into our province from anywhere in the world, and we're very proud of that. We also have a very vibrant engagement of Indian youth that are in our post-secondary system. About 40% of our international students, if you take all of our international students attending university in Saskatchewan, about 40% of them also from India. And so as you can see, there are many aspects to the partnership that we have between Saskatchewan and India, and the relationship that we have far beyond that of commerce. And if you are going to continue to do commerce, I think it's important for us to fully ingrain in one another's cultures and to understand one another. We also opened up, as Vijay said, a trade office in India, just opened it up here recently. We've hired a managing director at that trade office, Victor Lee. He's recently arrived in New Delhi, and he's looking forward to working with a our partners in India as well. As at the outset was mentioned, agriculture is the key pillar of our trading relationship. And that's the topic of discussion here today. We do a number of other items, I'd say uranium, and have supplied uranium to India for some time, as well as potash fertilizer. And increasingly, I think the technology world, the software world, if you will, Vijay, is really becoming of interest in both in Saskatchewan as well as in India. And I'm aware of a number of partnerships overseas that are, really budding opportunities. As we know, the government of India has introduced a number of agricultural reforms, 3 agricultural reform bills that have touched off a very passionate debate. And I immediately thought of the debate that we had here a number of years ago, and we've seen that debate extend outside of India, even into Canada. And I want to just share some of Saskatchewan's experiences dating back to about 2012, but also way back to the early days of agriculture, and what a central role agriculture has played in our life in Saskatchewan, which is very similar, I think, to the country of India. Agriculture has shaped our province. The people involved in agriculture have shaped our culture in Saskatchewan, much like they have in India. Our province literally was built by farmers, and continues to be in many ways built by farmers. But through continuous innovation, reform, our agricultural industry has evolved to become most notably a global leader in crop production, also in agricultural manufacturing, as well as in research and technology. And we're starting to branch out beyond just primary agriculture into all of the opportunities that come along with being a world leader in this industry. And the growth comes only with change. Change is not always easy, but growth also brings great opportunity. And as I said, that the most recent change was the elimination of the Canadian Wheat Board in 2012. It was established back in the 1930s, and it was government essentially doing all of the marketing, what began on a number of crops, but in the 30s, our staple was cereal grains. It extended to other crops and then started to fade out. And then in 2012 was absolutely removed from all of the cereal grains. They set the price, the Wheat Board set the price for farmers and the farmers had to accept it. As agricultural markets evolved around the world, this system literally became archaic and unworkable. It was a system that, looking back on it now, is very evident that it did nothing but stifle the growth in the industry. It stifled innovation, and it most certainly stifled opportunity for all of those that were interested in agriculture in any way. So in Saskatchewan, we saw this clearly because it was only Western Canadian farmers. It was only Saskatchewan, Manitoba, Alberta, and to a lesser degree, I believe, British Columbia farmers that were affected by the Wheat Board. Ontario farmers, Quebec farmers, and Eastern Canada weren't subject to the Western Canadian Wheat Board. They could sell their grain directly to any producer. We also had only one seller. So you had one buyer in the Canadian Wheat Board, but you only had one seller. And this was a real hindrance, is that if a company wanted to set up and process grain in Western Canada, you only had one person to purchase that grain from, and that was the Canadian Wheat Board. It was a single desk buyer, a single desk seller. There was no way around that. And quite understandably, there was tremendous frustration with this. Farmers wanted change, processors wanted change. And so in 2012, we had a federal government led by Prime Minister Stephen Harper at the day, who provided that change for the Western Canadian industry. And I would say it's done nothing but flourish since then. All grain farmers have now been able to choose who to sell their grain to. And those contracts that they enter into are based on price. They're based on quality. Their agreements that come about with respect to price, the quality of the grain that will be provided, the delivery date on when that grain will be provided, and a number of other contractual terms, as well as the delivery location on where that grain will be provided. The elimination of the Wheat Board has given farmers most certainly the freedom to market their wheat and barley directly to customers in the very same manner that they sold a number of other grains that they had started growing over the years. In essence, some of them being grown to avoid growing Wheat Board crops that could only be sold to the Wheat Board. And so farmers were moving away from this single desk government intrusion marketing even before the Wheat Board was abolished, by growing different grains. This was a significant change, and it brought some challenges in our agricultural industry in 2012, most certainly. But farmers have adapted, they've innovated, and they are far better off from the new opportunities that this has created. Today, about a decade after this modernization in our agricultural workplace happens, the hindsight provides us with an understanding of just how significant this change was for Canada's cereal sector and to farmers in general. The Western Canadian Wheat Growers is a farmer-run organization that we have, much like the ICCC here. But they have indicated that there's been over $3 billion worth of investment in improving just our national grain infrastructure, our offload facilities, as well as some of the logistics that we have. It's things like new inland terminals for delivery points, providing, because there's competition. So folks are looking to set up new inland terminals for delivery points for that product, so they can purchase it from the farmers, as well as we've seen significant upgrades in our port infrastructure, which is crucially important for an exporting nation such as Saskatchewan. We've also seen literally billions of dollars, and they continue to pour in today into our value-added industry. Our logistics upgrades include, loop tracks coming in to. We transport the bulk of our product by train. They've changed out their hopper cars for modern hopper cars, really changed in essence how they deliver grain from the interior, the Prairie Province of Saskatchewan out to our coastal ports. This level of investment was not taking place prior to 2012, when we had our government marketing board agency in place. These investments have most certainly are far in excess since that point in time. The end of the highly regulated and the managed grain industry that we have had and getting rid of it has certainly made way for the market-based system that we have today. The hedging, the forward pricing, the contracts that farmers are now able to actually allow companies to compete for their product, and really has improved the situation here over the course of the last decade now almost. Without the changes, the Saskatchewan economy, I can say most assuredly, the agricultural economy in Saskatchewan, which is a large part of our economy, would not have grown as quickly as it has the last 10 years. Marketing freedom was what we call it in Saskatchewan, has been good. Been very, very positive for Western Canadian farmers. It's been positive for our value-added industry and all the jobs that they provide in communities across this province. They are now able to diversify the crops, the crop bases that we grow. We're actually able to meet the demand of international companies in a much more reactive way than we ever were before, with a government-run entity running our crop marketing business. Farmers now determine their own crop rotation needs in a much more free fashion than they ever were able to before. The infrastructure investments have arisen in Saskatchewan. There's research investments now that are extremely targeted to specific crops with respect to fertility, with respect to what are the protein levels of that crop, what are the actual characteristics of that crop, and how do they meet the international needs that are out there. And there's a whole flurry of research and innovation jobs centered around, yes, the University of Saskatchewan, but many of them funded through, yes, some public investment, but by a large part, an increasing level, private investment of companies that want a specific product and are willing to invest in the research of a specific crop to be grown in the prairie provinces, and farmers respond very quickly when the price signals are there and they can find it profitable to change a crop, or more profitable. They will change out a crop very quickly and provide it for the international market. We've also, through that research, we are increasing our yield, whether it be the research into crop fertility, crop protection, or the particular crops that we are growing. As I said, we were up over $16 billion worth of exports this last year. It was actually just under 17. It was 16.9 billion. Saskatchewan, not Canada, is the world's largest exporter of dry peas, lentils, durum, mustard seed, canola oil, canola meal, canary seed, and oats. And that is where we have came in just a short number of years, just a few decades actually. And that is a credit to not just our agricultural producers, but the entire industry that is formed around our agricultural industry to ensure that we are maximizing our production, maximizing our quality, and really providing wealth. At the end of the day, providing wealth to the families that are involved, all the way up and down the value-added chain here in Saskatchewan. At the end of the day, that wealth equals an increase in income for our families in Saskatchewan, and we couldn't be happier with how this has come about. Notwithstanding some very difficult discussions back in 2012, and I remember them well. In 2013, farm cash receipts were about $4 billion, and for the first time in our province's history, we have stayed at $4 billion or exceeded it each and every year since. Without a question, the reforms in grain marketing advancements and technology and infrastructure improvements have most certainly helped our agricultural industry become far more profitable. As I said, the benefits also extend out to our research sector, a little bit on our research cluster that has transformed the industry. We have a number of entities that are involved in the research up in Saskatoon, also now growing down here in Regina, our two largest cities as well. What I call the urban agricultural industry is where the research and the agricultural implement manufacturing occurs, which I can get into in some of the questions. But our pulse, without that research cluster, our pulse sector in Saskatchewan, of which really is the mainstay of the commerce relationship that we have with Indian importers, would never have occurred without the research and innovation that is occurring. Lentils were essentially developed and modified to ensure to be able to grow in Saskatchewan, and they've been improved on over the course of the last years. And Saskatchewan being a reliable supplier in providing, in part with Indian agricultural producers, food security to the country of India. And we are part of that food security chain to the country of India. And that's how we view our relationship with India. Would have never occurred if it had not been for the innovation of pulse crops, in particular, likely first and foremost lentils. And that all occurred in a little, with actually one individual, his name was Al Slinkard, a number of years ago in a little lab in the University of Saskatchewan up in Saskatoon. Most certainly a positive for the world coming out of the innovation of the agriculture industry in Saskatchewan. And we continue to see increased funding in that research, just like I had spoken to, and largely increased funding over the course of the past decade, much of that coming from the private sector as they continue to compete for the products that we are producing here in Saskatchewan. And we're very thrilled to be involved in the agriculture industry to the level that we are. We have a number, what has sprung up since the demise of the Canadian Wheat Board, our single desk government marketing agency. As we've seen a number of farmer-run commissions arise that really are doing a number of different things. Yes, they're funding research. They're also working as a liaison between the industry and government, as well as the folks that are purchasing the grain and putting the contracts together, for example. And they're really the agricultural producers' representatives in many ways on all fronts. And they've been very, very effective in ensuring that the contracts that are available are in the best interests of farmers and the industry, ensuring that the voices of the agricultural producers are heard at the government level. And they have direct input on how the research dollars are actually spent within our research institutions. So all of this leads to new innovation and crop advancements, but leads to, most importantly, I think, a stronger bottom line for not just farmers, but all of those involved in the agricultural industry. And it becomes far greater than just the actual agricultural primary producers. So again, I will just say this in closing. Change can be difficult. It was difficult in Saskatchewan. And I see that it's very difficult today in India. Our farmers and our entire agriculture industry have experienced this firsthand during our brief history of just over 100 years here in this province. But what I've seen in our province, and I hope it would parlay around the world, is that our agricultural producers, and I say this as a global citizen, they are some of the most resilient and bold individuals I've ever met. And I met a number of Indian agricultural producers when I was there in 2018. In Saskatchewan, we embraced the opportunities that were before them. It wasn't without much discussion, but the entire province has benefited. Everyone has benefited, and so have our international trading partners, countries like India. So what has agricultural reform meant for Saskatchewan? It means more income for farmers. It means more expansion of crucial infrastructure in the agricultural industry. It means we have experienced a higher degree of investment in value-added processing, which means more competition for the agricultural producers' grain. It has meant more investment in innovation, more investment in research, and ultimately has meant more jobs in our province, which is our gold standard, which we're always trying to achieve. So in Canada, and I would say by extension in India, the opportunities are most certainly there. But it does take courage to pursue those opportunities. The payoff is not always immediate. It's not overnight. But in the long term, everyone benefits from agricultural reform. And I think in Saskatchewan, we are the most shining example of that. So thank you for your time. Thank you to the ICCC for providing myself some time this morning to maybe draw some analogies from around the world with With a number of folks that have ties to, one of our largest trading partners and a country that Saskatchewan most certainly wants to strengthen our relationship with over the next number of years.
Thank you very much, Premier Moe. You couldn't have done a better job of connecting the two together. And I think you've had some really fantastic remarks there on how, if we thought from a global citizen standpoint, how this is important for all of us. Even if we, got out of the national, spirit and the nationalist view of it, from a global view of it, getting agriculture, sorted out is something that we as a world have to look at. Now, with that, I'd like to move to our next speaker. Our next speaker needs no introduction. If you're an Indo-Canadian, you work in the Indo-Canada corridor, you know of His Excellency, the High Commissioner Ajay Bisaria. Mr. Ajay Bisaria has been the High Commissioner of India to Canada from March 1st, 2020. So he kind of came in just before COVID hit. We had the privilege of meeting him in one of those periods when he came to Toronto and where they did not have a lockdown and we could meet people. So we actually had the privilege of meeting him face to face. He's been a career diplomat, joined the Indian Foreign Service in 1987. And there's a whole bunch of stuff there. I'd like you to read through it. The one highlight, I think, was he was the private secretary to the Prime Minister of India in 1999, and this was the Prime Minister Vajpayee, and he was also at the World Bank. Just before coming here, he has had a couple of hot seat assignments. He served as the High Commissioner of India to Pakistan. So with that, I'd like to welcome His Excellency, the High Commissioner Ajay Bisaria. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Vijay. Thank you for this lovely introduction. And greetings to you, Excellency Scott Moe, Premier of Saskatchewan, for such a wonderful presentation on what has been happening with Saskatchewan. And listening to you, I think it's very clear to all of us that this is the future India is aspiring for, which you are showing us in Saskatchewan. This is exactly what the Indian agricultural reforms are all about. But let me start by thanking the Indo-Canadian Chamber of Commerce for putting together this very important conversation around India's agriculture reforms and choosing such a wonderful partner within Canada to have this conversation with. The timing is very appropriate because we are celebrating Vaisakhi, the festival of spring and harvest. And this is really a perfect time to be talking about this issue. And let me also congratulate all Canadians here on being voted the best country in the world by US News. And certainly if there was a vote for the best agricultural province within Canada, it goes to the prairies and it goes to Saskatchewan. So it's a wonderful setting to have this conversation. What I thought I'd do is just briefly talk about the agricultural reforms in India and then talk about some of the opportunities it's been throwing up for the Indo-Canadian Economic Corridor. So looking at the agricultural reforms, they were essentially and fundamentally about increasing productivity and empowering our farmers. So this was clearly the objective of the reforms, and the backdrop, of course, was that we felt that business as usual was not the way to go. Over 50% of India's population is involved in agriculture, but we get just about 15% of the GDP from the agriculture sector, which speaks of the lower productivity, which we wanted to change. And there were several bottlenecks that have been talked about at the expert level, whether it's inputs, mechanization, low returns. But the bottom line has been a great deal of agrarian distress, high debts, and something that Indians are aware of. And there has been a conversation for at least the last 2 or 3 decades on this issue at the expert level. And what we have is a widespread consensus, I think, across academia, across experts, scientists, that something needed to change, that we needed reforms, and broadly the direction of the reforms has also been very clear. The debate has been on the specific pathways. And this conversation about reforms has, of course, been informed by global experience. And we have with us the experience of Saskatchewan, which you've so eloquently put out. And that is something which really does inform the thinking that went into the reforms. One interesting point about the reforms and the objective of having a single agricultural market was that we needed one nation, one market, and we needed all states of India to be part of this conversation. Several states had already removed the restrictions. And when these reforms came in last year, the three bills, very simply put, were about markets, they were about contracts, and they were about transportation and storage. So it was about creating designated markets, giving farmers the opportunity to go into different markets and not face a monopoly of purchase of produce. It allowed farmers to get into contracts with buyers for their future crops, and it allowed transportation and storage of produce by private entities. So exactly the kind of reforms that Premier Moore talked about in Saskatchewan, the dismantling of the Canadian Wheat Board, was the kind of reforms that are envisaged here. And there is an additional element here when we are having these conversations in India about continuing in the transition phase, all the comfort that the farmers would need, that is the minimum purchase price that the government fixes for strategic buffers to be made of farm produce. So the idea is to create a pan-India market, get in additional investment and credit, as Premier Moore talked about, value-added investment in research, innovation. That was precisely the objective, and to get in newer technologies, to get more returns for farmers. Very explicitly stated objective of this government was doubling farmers' income, and especially those of the small and marginal farmers who needed particular help. These reforms are also meant to make agriculture more sustainable, both in terms of environment and economically. So, for instance, one of the issues we faced was an excessive drawing of groundwater for the rice and wheat crops which were being cultivated, and giving the farmers, the objective was a greater choice in the kind of crops they use. So these reforms are very similar to the reforms in Canada, which primarily involved what Saskatchewan and Western Canada saw. Also, Premier Moore spoke about reforms and the fact that reforms are never easy. And this is something that India now realizes. We are taking the bull by the horns. And what India is going through, even last year in a pandemic year, but over the last few years, is an attempt to bring in across the board structural reforms to sort of turbocharge the economy. And this has been in various sectors. We've seen it in land, in labor, in capital, in liquidity issues, in education, and in agriculture, in making technology available. So a wide range of reforms, and agriculture was part of it, to fundamentally change the way the Indian agricultural economy and the Indian economy would behave, to realize our aspiration of doubling our GDP to $5 trillion by 2025 and $10 trillion by 2035. So the whole objective was to have agriculture also modernize and give it the opportunities. There has been, as Premier Moore pointed out, a passionate debate and a great deal of conversation and controversy about these reforms, because some people quite naturally had genuine differences of opinion about the pathway, and we welcomed these conversations. The government held about 11 rounds of discussions with various unions of agriculturalists. The government remains open to have these conversations. There's even been a moratorium on the application of the reforms to give more time for everyone to have an intelligent, fact-based, evidence-based conversation on the tweaking or changes that they would require. And the Indian system has proven resilient enough to have these conversations with the courts stepping in, the executive, and these are ongoing conversations, and we hope that after these conversations take place and everyone is taken along, we will have a set of reforms that would take us on the path of prosperity for farmers that Saskatchewan has seen. Coming to the bilateral picture, we have a strategic partnership with Canada since 2015, when Prime Minister Modi came to Canada and had an agreement signed with the government of Prime Minister Harper. But since then, the economic engagement has front and center led the strategic partnership between India and Canada. And India is already a major market for Canadian firms and for Canadian farmers, as Premier Mo pointed out. India imports most of its pulses and lentils from Canada, or in large quantities, and also imports potash for the use of fertilizers from Canada. And Saskatchewan is a very, very strong resource supplier for India for fueling India's growth. Now, we certainly feel that the opening of Indian markets will eventually benefit Canadian farmers, and it would provide greater competition, greater access to markets. Canada has been in the WTO and other forums having a conversation with India about the need for such reforms for providing greater access to the Indian markets, for instance, certainly for pulses and lentils, but for other issues as well. But one of the strong points of interest for India is Canadian technology. The technology that you have deployed in the agriculture sector is of great interest to India as we go through these reforms. India is showing a great deal of capacity to absorb newer technologies. We've had a couple of conversations with the technology superclusters in Canada, and one, of course, is located in Premier Mo's province, which is the protein supercluster. So we are deeply interested in the kind of technologies available there for various kinds of agriculture, including using digital technologies, precision agriculture, using the Internet of Things, and using all the latest technologies which we want to be available to our farmers. So a greater investment, a greater upgrade of our agro-tech sphere is what we need. We were willing to have conversations around agriculture technology at the level of experts so that we understand what it is that we can completely or immediately adapt from what is available in Saskatchewan. So I think it's certainly a win-win in the India-Canada economic corridor. We need to have more drilling down conversations on agriculture technology, and of course we see the future in what Saskatchewan has been able to do, and we want to learn from that experience and adapt it for India. So it's a great opportunity, we think, that is coming up for investment, for technology, for capital infusion, and for exports for Saskatchewan. And all of these are welcome. So let me stop right there. I think, thank you again for this opportunity from the Indo-Canadian Chamber of Commerce.
Thank you, Ajay Bisaria. Really appreciate your comments. I think a lot of people were listening very intently. I think a couple of key points there. There is a moratorium, so it is not, right now there's more discussion on the topic, and we'll get to it. So I have a bunch of questions. We'll go through this in a very rapid fire, fashion. We'll try to get as many questions done as we can. So first question to you, Premier Mo. There is, parallels in 2012 and what's happening right now in India. But as you mentioned, there is a slight difference though. There's 1.2 million people versus 1.3 billion people, right? So it's 1,000 times bigger, right? The problem is 1,000 times bigger. However, having said that, how did Saskatchewan actually get the farmers on board? There may be parallels here for the Indian situation as well. Do you want to talk about that? What did you guys do anything specific? What did you guys, how did you sell it?
Well, the parallels are most certainly there, save for a few zeros on the number of people that are in Saskatchewan versus maybe what's in India. It wasn't without discussion and very passionate debate, just like what we are seeing in India here as well. And actually, in the first year or two after we made our changes, we had one of the largest crops on record, and we had some logistical issues with getting the crop out of, actually moving the crop out to export position, and it was quite challenging, and it spurred more of that passionate debate. But what I think essentially really started to get people on side was the companies that were purchasing the grain started to compete for the harvestable product, to the point of signing forward pricing contracts actually that have and this is where the representatives and the commissions do come into play, is to ensure that those contracts are protecting the agricultural producer. And ultimately, the government has a role to play in the regulations of this as well. At least we did in Canada and Saskatchewan. But people were then able to start pricing their crop over a course of months and take the price maybe at a time of year where they might not even have had any crop in the bin. It's being seeded here this spring. And that took some time as well to get comfortable with that. But right now, for instance, we have canola prices that have been pretty solid the last month or two. We have folks that are not only selling the crop that they still have in the bin here in Saskatchewan, but they're starting to turn an eye, many of them, to forward pricing next year's harvest as well, and maybe selling a portion of that. And so you get into this whole hedging and marketing, which again, starts to create all of these other jobs in the agricultural industry, jobs that were just simply didn't exist prior to the deregulation of the market. So it took some time to gain the full confidence of all of the farmers, I would say, and probably not 100% even today on being confident with the move. But I think very quickly, and I would say inside of 2 to 3 years, the producers saw that they actually had a commodity that people wanted, and people were willing to compete to purchase that product from them. Whereas prior to that, we had just one entity that was purchasing that. One very, very similar parallels. I've read through the 3 bills in India and what we went through in Saskatchewan. One of the differences, as you mentioned, is the number of people, of course, and which would is a significant difference. But one of the other differences is the minimum price, I understand, is still in place. We didn't have that when we abolished the wheat board, so we went at it without that minimum price, and I don't think anyone would look back.
Mm-hmm. And Premier Moore, thank you very much. I think that's something that I have not heard in this discussion in India, but a forward pricing, which I think, if somebody goes and says, I'm going to pay you so much for the next 5 years, for the next 10 years, and they have assured income for the next, couple of years, I think that might be something, because the minimum price anyways is like an insurance, it's like a safety net. But if prices are anyway higher, the safety net is irrelevant anyways. I mean, it's just there to make sure that people have something to rely on. So thank you very much, Premier Mo. The next question will go to Ajay Bisaria. Bisaria, the question is, with 2020 hindsight and now with the moratorium, in 18 months, do you see things to turn out differently? Do you think I think is the bill going to fundamentally change, or is it the time is for discussion, or how do like there's a lot of people that are following this very passionately in Canada as well. So how do you put their minds at ease and say that this is going to how does the Indian government look at this differently and say, this time around with the 18 months moratorium, we're going to get this right? And we also have global examples of how this has been done. So how would you put some of their minds at ease?
Well, there is a very, very strong discourse and conversation going on in India. And as you would know, what the government has said with these three bills to everyone who has a difference of opinion, that the government stands willing to have meetings and have a clause-by-clause discussion about all the bills. So the government remains very flexible on this issue, and there is a great deal of sensitivity to the concerns that folks have. And the point is that everything is discussable, everything can be negotiated, and we hope, and my personal hope would be that we certainly in the next few years persuade everyone to the wisdom of these bills. They are meant to double farmers' incomes, help farmers, eliminate middlemen, and get onto a situation where everyone benefits. It will be a win-win. And we see the future in Saskatchewan. So whichever way it involves, India will have to find a unique solution based on these democratic conversations that we're having. And over the next few months, we certainly hope it's resolved and we will move forward and implement this very important economic reform that our economy, our country, our people need.
Thank you, Bisaria. Another question. I'll go to both of you on this one. There has been a couple of headwinds in the India-Canada relationship. Off late, we at the Indo-Canada Chamber of Commerce, with the meeting of Prime Minister Trudeau and the Prime Minister Modi, and the vaccine that India sent to Canada, we see this as a turning point in this relationship. We are definitely batting for a growth spurt here. We look for from a glass half full perspective. We see that a rising tide in trade can float all boats, and this is something that we truly believe in at the Indo-Canada Chamber of Commerce. But I'd like to go to you, the Honorable Scott Moe. Have you, in Saskatchewan, you've increased your exports to India by 91% in the last 2 years. So, however, there have been tariffs and there have been quotas and there have been things like that. So, what is your take on those issues? Is it free flowing? It seems like there's been throttled a little bit in between, but do you think we get to free flow soon? What are your thoughts on this whole relationship?
Yeah, well, first of all, I won't comment on the Canada-Indian relationship, but we've opened up our trade office in India now. We're very focused in on the Saskatchewan India relationship, and even the relationship between Saskatchewan and a number of the Indian provinces there. The tariffs have been around for some time, and they did. There was some relaxing on the lentil tariffs, I believe. I think that's back now up to about 30%. That's a challenge for Saskatchewan in exporting to India. But as you see, it hasn't totally hindered those exports by any stretch. And I think that speaks to the broader, stronger relationship that Saskatchewan believes we have with India, and also believes that we need to continue to work on into the future. Listen, I was in India. I met with importers. I met with agricultural producers. I understand the reasoning behind the tariffs, and so I'm not here to provide advice on that. But it is a challenge to that relationship. But it most certainly is not an insurmountable challenge. We'd like to see them gone, and to further that relationship, but we do understand the reasoning behind them. Here's where Saskatchewan views ourselves in our relationship with India. If you're a country and you're looking for food security, energy security, or whatever that might be, there's really two ways you can do that. One is you can grow it yourself. Two is you can purchase it from somewhere else. And what we would suggest, and where Saskatchewan sees ourselves fitting into this, is working with India on the long term through the ebbs and flows, ups and downs of our trade relationship. But we want to be that safe, reliable, long-term supplier of not only agricultural products, but uranium and potash, fertilizer, and energy products as well. And we're totally committed to that. That's why we have a trade office that has just opened up there. That's why we've had two ministers and myself on the ground in the 2 years leading up to the pandemic. That's why you're going to see us on the ground again as soon as we find our way through this pandemic. And so we're very, very positive on the future relationship that we'll have with India. And we think we also have a lot to offer in the way of all of the periphery around an agricultural industry, where I would offer is a real benefit. We in Saskatchewan now have a vibrant agricultural manufacturing industry that started on folks' farms. It started with farmers. We have a research and innovation industry that is all guided by our farmers and guided by the agricultural industry. We have the technology industry is now pouring into all of the industries. There is no single tech industry. If you're in agriculture in Saskatchewan, you're in the tech industry. If you're in potash mining in Saskatchewan, you're in the tech industry. If you're in uranium mining in Saskatchewan, you by default are in the tech industry, or you aren't going to be in business in the next decade. So, we've supported that sector, and I'm seeing those relationships, financial relationships, starting to grow. And I saw that when I was in India with Canadian and Indian companies that had come together to advance either their market access, to advance some of the technology that they were working on. And really, those are the partnerships where you get together and 1 + 1 actually starts to equal 3, which my math teacher in high school would not like that analogy. But
thank you very much, Premier Mo. Ajay Bisaria ji, same question to you. Where do you see this, right now, and again, as you said, tariffs doesn't seem to have, dampened the enthusiasm of Canadian exporters or Indian importers of pulses and stuff from Saskatchewan. But is that something that, is something that you've been thinking of, or you've been, sending messages to, or overall, with Saskatchewan, as the Indo-Canada Chamber of Commerce, we love trade. Our vision is, trade between India and Canada becomes Canada's, Canada becomes India becomes Canada's, largest, second largest, or right on top there in terms of a trade partner. We're not there as yet. How do we get there?
Okay, great question. Let me start with the big picture that you mentioned. I feel that the Indo-Canadian relationship is in a very good space right now. And just as an example of this, on the 10th of February, Prime Minister Trudeau called up Prime Minister Modi and said, look, we need some vaccines. And within 3 weeks, we had 500,000 doses of AstraZeneca in Canada. They're already in Canadian arms. So this is the kind of relationship we need. It is a strategic partnership. And there would always be blips because when you have a big engagement of $100 billion in terms of trade, investment, and remittances, there would always be issues that we face, and we need to, as strategic partners, address them head on and deal with them. And this is precisely what we are doing. The future is looking bright because we have in place a discussion now on a possible trade agreement between India and Canada. We are talking of an early harvest agreement, where we put together a basket of issues that we both agree on, and hope to work out an early harvest trade agreement, a bilateral investment protection agreement. And the interesting thing about investment in India is that it went up in this pandemic year. So Canadian investment in India actually increased. Today, the largest investor in India globally is Brookfield of Canada, which has a portfolio of $20 billion of investment in India. Today, the first unicorn coming out of India in 2021 was a Canada-supported unicorn, Digit Insurance, which Fairfax supported. So there are many, many positive stories. And on Saskatchewan, I think it's a microcosm of the possibilities in the relationship. As Premier Mo mentioned, Saskatchewan provides energy security, food security, both to India. It's a strong partner in providing both these types of security. And there are issues on which we have very open conversations, and they relate to whether lentil prices, lentil tariffs, uranium, potash. But when you have a bunch of issues, you'll always have problems coming up, which we resolve very quickly. And I think this is Saskatchewan has really taken the lead in terms of having boots on the ground in India. It will have a much better understanding of the dramatically changing scenario in India and all the possibilities that are arising. So I think we are moving in a very, very positive direction.
Thank you very much, Ajay Bisaria. We are almost out of time. Well, quickly, I know the Honorable Scott Moore has to get to the houses in session in Saskatchewan, so we will let you go. But last question for this 1 minute. If the question here is in terms of any advice that you may want to give to members of the Indo-Canada Chamber of Commerce, and we have members that are exporting from India to Canada and importing from India to Canada, and some of them might not be engaging with Saskatchewan at the moment. So any word of advice for them, Premier Moore?
Well, my first word of advice would be to engage with Saskatchewan, because we most certainly want to engage with you. But more specific to the changes that are underway in the agricultural industry in India, I would say a few things. One, the ag industry is going to change. I would say that over the course of a few years, it's going to be a change for the better. I think you're going to see ag producers that are going to bring more money home to their families. I think you're going to see all of these opportunities spring up, and this is where you might be wanting to keep an eye on. All of these opportunities spring up surrounding primary agriculture. We have 50 years ago, kids that grew up on a farm wanted to be a farmer in Saskatchewan. Now kids that grow up on a farm want to go to university. They may want to go to university to be an engineer, go to agriculture, the number of different disciplines we have in agriculture, or something like that. And then they want to come back and they want to be an agrologist. They want to be a crop researcher. They want to work in the ag equipment industry that has burgeoned and really been formed out of farmyards here in the province, really pushing the innovation that we have. So there's all of these peripheral opportunities, business opportunities that are going to come as agriculture itself becomes more profitable and is able to support this what I call the urban agricultural industry, because it happens in our urban centers. So there's all of this opportunity that is coming that I think many that haven't traditionally been business people and employees that haven't traditionally been involved in primary agriculture are all of a sudden going to have all of this opportunity to be involved in agriculture on the periphery. And we have some very profitable industries. We have 5 or 6 fairly significant manufacturing companies that are building seed drills here in Saskatchewan and exporting them all around the world. We have a number of companies that are exporting the knowledge in crop production that we have, just exporting something as simple as the knowledge of crop production and crop protection that we have here in Saskatchewan. So one, I would say, is to keep your eye. First was to engage with Saskatchewan, because we want to engage with you. 2 is to keep your eye on the agricultural industry, even if you're not directly involved. Vijay, you had said the things are very similar. The most notable difference is a couple of zeros on the end of the population. Well, what I've spoken about as far as the successes in Saskatchewan, they stand to be 1,000 times greater in India. And I would say when you look at Indian agriculture today and look at Saskatchewan agriculture today, and you look at the opportunities in Indian agriculture, I would say they actually could probably times that by another 1,000 as well, for how quickly I think that Indian agriculture can actually progress, create wealth for all of those folks living in rural communities. The opportunities are great. The discussion to get there is going to be passionate, and that's a good thing, because it ensures that at the end of the day, everyone will land at the in the right place, and the right place at times, as difficult as it is, I firmly believe in Saskatchewan's case, has been to reform a number of different things that we do. Most notably and most recently was removing government from the marketing of our agricultural producers and actually allow the agricultural producers to access those markets on their own. It has proved to be tremendously beneficial for our ag industry.
Thank you very much, Premier Mo. And so if I were to summarize that, those extra numbers, so if what Saskatchewan did 12 years back, if it got itself, let's say, X returns, we're talking about 1,000x returns possible in India. So on that note, I'd like to go to Ajay Bisaria. Quick 30 seconds, close from your side, if you have a few words to say.
Absolutely. So the quick one is, of course, please listen to Premier Mo and do exactly what he says. But I would echo what he's saying about opportunities in Saskatchewan, in agriculture, in medical technology, and look at the opportunities in the startup space. Look at the possibility. India is being driven by 100 unicorns that have produced the growth it has. So look at the newer companies, look at startups, and look at technology for fueling the Indo-Canadian corridor.
Thank you very much to both of you. We have to go through a few quick messages and just quickly thank our sponsors and partners. We got to thank our technology partner Tangentia. We've got to also thank our sponsors Turkish Airlines, media partners Weekly Voice, PTC Punjabi, sector sponsor SBI Canada Bank, ICCC Bank Canada, Raymond James, Seneca, GT20, and TELUS Business. With that, we've come to the end of a fantastic session. Thank you very much to our audience for participating. And we have this event every Thursday. Please sign in. Thank you very much, Premier Scott Moe. Thank you very much, His Excellency, the High Commissioner Ajay Bisaria. Have a great evening. Those of you in India, have a great day. Everybody in Canada. Thank you very much.
Thank you.